Stop for a moment and listen carefully. A narcissist is not invincible. Many people fall into the illusion that such individuals are untouchable, almost as if they were immune to emotional consequences. They appear confident, dominant, and in control of every situation. Yet behind that carefully constructed mask, there lies a fragility so deep that it terrifies them. This fragility, their greatest weakness, is their inability to withstand losing control over another person's attention, energy, and mind. A narcissist thrives when you revolve around them. When you break free from that orbit, their world begins to shake. To understand why this happens, we need to look at how narcissism is built. A narcissist does not develop a solid sense of self in the way emotionally healthy individuals do. Instead of internal confidence, they depend on external sources to maintain their self-image. Their entire identity is a performance designed to secure admiration, attention, or fear from others. Psychologists refer to this as narcissistic supply. It is the fuel that keeps their fragile sense of self alive. Without it, they crumble. And here lies their most painful weakness. When you no longer feed them the supply they desperately need, they collapse internally, even if they try to disguise it with rage, manipulation, or cold indifference. Think about the beginning of a relationship. With a narcissist, they study you like a scientist observing a subject. They want to know your dreams, your wounds, your insecurities, and your desires. But they do not seek this information out of love or genuine care. They collect it like weapons to be used later. First, they charm you, showering you with compliments, affection, and what seems like genuine interest. This stage is often called love bombing. It feels intoxicating because they seem to see you more deeply than anyone else ever has. But in reality, they are simply mirroring your own qualities back to you, giving you the illusion of connection. Over time, the mask begins to slip. They withdraw affection, create subtle criticisms, and inject doubt into your mind. They want you to feel unstable, so you cling harder to them. This is the cruel paradox. They starve you emotionally and then give you crumbs of validation enough to keep you hooked. This manipulation creates dependency. But here is the truth you must anchor in. No one can enslave a person who learns to validate themselves from within. Say it now, even silently. I do not depend on anyone else's attention to know my worth. This is why their greatest weakness is reality itself. Reality does not bend to their fantasies. When you stop reacting, when you stop feeding into their drama, when you stop making their voice the loudest in your mind, their illusion collapses. They cannot stand your calm, they cannot tolerate your boundaries, they cannot survive long without your emotional energy. Their fantasy of control requires constant fuel. Your anger, your tears, your explanations, your need for closure. Without it, they are left facing the one thing they fear most, their own emptiness. Remember this affirmation. My calm breaks the cycle. Let's deepen this understanding. A narcissist is addicted not to love, but to control. Control is their drug, and they will do anything to get another dose. If anger manipulates you, they will provoke you. If guilt manipulates you, they will play the victim. If admiration manipulates you, they will seduce you. Their strategies are endless, but the intention is always the same. Keep you hooked, keep you reacting, keep you investing your energy. Yet control has one fatal flaw: it only works when the other person participates. When you choose not to play, you dismantle their entire system. That is why your awareness, your detachment, and your boundaries are the most threatening weapons to a narcissist. Repeat to yourself, I choose where my attention goes. Now imagine this scenario. The narcissist returns after ignoring you for days. In the past, you might have anxiously responded, desperate for answers. This time, however, you breathe deeply. You answer calmly, without urgency, without explaining yourself. You do not beg for clarity. You do not demand affection. You simply hold your ground with short, clear responses. Watch what happens. Their mask begins to twitch. They cannot handle the loss of control. They may escalate, trying different tactics, switching from sweet to cruel in seconds, anything to make you lose composure, but you remain steady. This is the essence of reclaiming your power. My peace is not negotiable. Let us be very clear. The narcissist is not destroyed by your anger. In fact, they thrive on it. Anger proves that you are still emotionally attached, still reacting, still giving them the fuel they crave. What they cannot endure is your awareness, your conscious choice to step back, to analyze the pattern, and to decide not to feed into it anymore. This is not coldness, it is strength. It is a mature, disciplined form of self-respect. Tell yourself firmly, I am loyal to myself before anyone else. Another important aspect of their weakness is the truth. Narcissists live inside narratives they invent about themselves and others. They rewrite history, exaggerate achievements, and twist facts. But when you hold on to reality, when you keep track of what really happened, when you refuse to let them gaslight you into confusion, their manipulative power weakens. One of the most effective strategies is to document their behavior. Write down the promises they break, the cycles of silence and affection, the contradictions in their words. Clarity is your anchor. The narcissist despises clarity because it strips away their illusions. Affirm this. I trust my memory and my clarity over their manipulations. You may feel guilt when you set boundaries. This guilt is natural, especially if you have been conditioned to please others or fear conflict. But guilt is not always a sign that you are doing something wrong. Often it is simply the echo of old conditioning. Narcissists exploit this guilt, calling you selfish, cold, or ungrateful, but in reality, boundaries are acts of health. They honor you and ultimately bring truth into relationships. Do not confuse kindness with separation. Kindness respects both yourself and others. Complacency destroys you to protect them. Remember, I can be kind without betraying myself. As Carl Jung taught, every human being carries a shadow, the parts of ourselves we do not want to see. The narcissist's shadow is unbearable for them. They cannot face their deep insecurity, their fear of abandonment, their fragile ego, so they project it onto others. They make you feel insecure, abandoned, and small because that is what they secretly feel inside. When you begin to work on your own shadow, your fear of loneliness, your craving for approval, your struggle to say no, you stop being vulnerable to their games. Once you master yourself, their hooks lose their power. Say it with conviction: I am enough, even when I stand alone. Here is the ultimate truth. The greatest weakness of a narcissist is not you, it is their dependence on you. Without your reactions, without your energy, without your validation, they collapse into the emptiness they have been running from all their lives. This is why they fight so hard to keep you in their orbit. They cannot generate self-worth internally, so they need you to provide it. The moment you stop giving, their carefully constructed identity begins to crack. And that is the beginning of your liberation. The narcissist's worst nightmare is not your anger, not your criticism, and not even your rejection. Their nightmare is your calm awareness, your refusal to participate in their games. They thrive when you are unstable, when your emotions swing, like a pendulum between hope and despair. They want you reactive, desperate, questioning yourself. But once you anchor yourself in reality, once you become a steady flame rather than a wildfire, you cut the fuel line that sustains their illusion. This is why your serenity, your detachment, and your refusal to chase them is the sharpest weapon you possess. Think about the dynamic of control. A narcissist builds relationships not to share, but to dominate. They believe intimacy is a stage where they perform as the main actor while everyone else plays supporting roles. They script the story, and they expect you to follow their lines. If you refuse to follow the script, the play collapses. This collapse is intolerable to them because it exposes the truth. Their power was never real, it was borrowed. Your recognition, your approval, your attention, that was their oxygen. And when you withdraw it, they suffocate. Let us go deeper into the mechanics of this. A narcissist survives on what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. This is the same psychological principle used in gambling. When rewards are unpredictable, they become more addictive. The narcissist withholds affection, then suddenly floods you with love. They insult you, then apologize with grand gestures. This inconsistency keeps you hooked, always chasing the next high. But here's the paradox: the same mechanism that keeps you hooked is also their downfall. Because once you recognize the pattern, once you see it for what it is, a cycle designed to manipulate, you are no longer trapped by it. Awareness breaks the spell. You stop waiting for crumbs when you realize you deserve the whole meal. Say it with strength: I am no longer addicted to uncertainty. I deserve consistency and truth. Now let's consider how their weakness shows itself when you reclaim your energy. Picture this: you stop arguing. You stop explaining yourself endlessly. You no longer rush to prove your loyalty, your goodness, your worth. Instead, you act with quiet confidence. You speak less. You observe more. This silence, this unshakable presence, terrifies them. Why? Because it reveals their lack of substance. A narcissist's power depends on noise, on chaos, on reactions. When you bring silence and clarity, they cannot hide behind the storm. Your restraint becomes a mirror they cannot stand to look into. Affirm this: my silence is powerful. My restraint protects me. It is important to recognize the stages of their unraveling when confronted with this strength. At first, they may mock you, trying to provoke you into defending yourself. Then, they may play the victim, accusing you of being cold, heartless, or unfair. When that fails, they might escalate into rage, shouting, insulting, or even threatening. Each of these stages is a desperate attempt to regain control. But notice something crucial. Their escalation is not strength, it is weakness on display. The louder they shout, the clearer it becomes that they are losing their grip. This is why your calm boundary is so vital. Your peace is the rope that pulls you out of their storm. I do not match chaos with chaos. I bring order by standing firm. Let's expand further with practical strategies that expose their weaknesses. One of the most effective is setting firm boundaries. Without over-explaining, for example, you might say, I don't accept being spoken to in that tone. I will not respond to messages after midnight. If you raise your voice, this conversation ends. Notice the simplicity. No justification, no apology, no lengthy explanation. Why? Because over-explaining gives them ammunition. It invites them to twist your words, to argue endlessly, to turn your defense into a weakness. Boundaries work best when they are clear, consistent, and concise. A narcissist may hate your boundaries, but they cannot dismantle them unless you open the door by explaining too much. Remember this affirmation: my boundaries do not require permission. They exist because I value myself. The psychology of this is fascinating. When you hold firm boundaries, you activate something called cognitive dissonance within the narcissist. Their fantasy of control collides with the reality of your independence. They may try harder to pull you back, but the more they fail, the more cracks appear in their self-image. This dissonance is unbearable for them. They will either escalate or retreat. Both outcomes reveal their fragility. Either they rage because they cannot dominate you, or they disappear because they cannot face their own powerlessness. In both cases, your strength exposes their weakness. Now, let us reflect on the role of guilt. Guilt is a powerful weapon in the hands of a narcissist. They might say, "You've changed," or "You don't love me anymore," or "You're selfish." These words are designed to pierce your conscience, to make you doubt yourself. But here's the truth. Guilt often arises when you step out of unhealthy patterns. It is the echo of old conditioning, not an indicator that you are doing wrong. Many people mistake guilt for morality, but the two are not the same. Morality honors truth and integrity. Guilt often chains us to destructive cycles. When you feel guilt for setting boundaries, remind yourself, this guilt is not proof I am wrong. It is proof I am healing. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow is crucial here. The narcissist cannot face their shadow of the deep insecurities, fears, and vulnerabilities they bury inside. Instead, they project them onto you. If they feel unworthy, they call you unworthy. If they fear abandonment, they accuse you of abandoning them. This projection is their way of escaping themselves. But here is where the transformation lies. When you confront your own shadow, your fear of being alone, your need for validation, your reluctance to say no, you become immune to theirs. You cannot be manipulated by a weakness you have already faced in yourself. That is why personal growth is the greatest antidote to narcissistic control. Say it firmly: I face my own shadow. I cannot be controlled by projections. Let's examine the long-term perspective. The more you build internal validation, the less power they have. Internal validation means you measure your worth not by their approval, but by your values, your growth, and yourself. When you wake up in the morning, ask yourself, am I living in alignment with my truth? That question matters more than any compliment or insult a narcissist throws your way. They want you to be addicted to their approval. Your task is to break that addiction by rooting your identity in yourself. Remember, I am my own source of worth. I do not need their validation to know who I am. One of the most liberating realizations is this: their weakness is built into their very nature. Because they cannot sustain themselves without external validation, they are forever dependent on others. That dependence is their prison. They may appear powerful, but their strength is always borrowed. It relies on your participation. The moment you withdraw, the illusion shatters. This is why detachment is not just a strategy, it is a revelation. You see them clearly, not as an all-powerful manipulator, but as a fragile person trapped in their own emptiness. And once you see that truth, you can never unsee it, declare it. Their power was never real. It was always mine, waiting for me to reclaim it. The greatest weakness of the narcissist becomes even more visible when we examine what happens after you begin to step away from their control. At first, they cannot accept that you are no longer orbiting around them. This resistance often appears as manipulation, sudden charm, or even rage. But underneath these tactics lies one undeniable truth. Without your energy, they feel like they are disappearing. They cannot stand silence, they cannot bear indifference, and they certainly cannot tolerate the sight of someone they once controlled now walking in freedom. That sight is unbearable because it forces them to confront what they spend their lives avoiding their emptiness. To understand this more clearly, let's explore why the narcissist clings so desperately to others. At the core of narcissism lies a fragile sense of self. Unlike emotionally healthy individuals who can self-soothe, reflect, and grow from their mistakes, narcissists lack the ability to generate a stable inner identity. Their self-image is like a mirror that needs constant polishing, but they cannot polish it themselves. Instead, they rely on others to reflect back what they want to see. When you provide admiration, fear, or emotional reactions, you act as that mirror. But when you stop, when you refuse to reflect their illusion, they are left facing a distorted and broken image. And this is intolerable for them. Repeat to yourself, I am not their mirror. I am not their supply. I choose to reflect my own worth. This fragility explains why narcissists often live in cycles of relationships. They idealize new partners, flood them with attention, and extract admiration. But once the partner begins to see the cracks, once reality intrudes, the narcissist devalues them, discards them, and seeks new supply. The cycle repeats endlessly because they are not seeking love or connection, they are seeking escape from themselves. This is why your calm detachment is so powerful. It denies them the cycle. It breaks the loop. It forces them into confrontation with what they cannot bear, their shadow. Now let's expand into practical applications of this knowledge. When you recognize their weakness, you can protect yourself more effectively. The first tool is emotional regulation. Before responding to any provocation, take a slow, deep breath. Narcissists rely on your impulsive reaction, whether it is anger, tears, or desperate explanations. When you regulate yourself first, you take away their control. Breathing slowly, pausing, or even leaving the room are small but powerful acts of defiance. They show that you, not the narcissist, choose when and how to engage. Say to yourself, I control my responses. My emotions are mine, not theirs. The second tool is strategic communication. Instead of getting caught in endless debates, practice concise statements that cannot be twisted. For example, that's not acceptable to me. I won't continue this conversation if it turns disrespectful. We can talk when we're both calm. These phrases are firm but not aggressive. They provide no emotional fuel. The narcissist may try to provoke, but without your emotional investment, their words lose power. This strategy frustrates them because it reveals their dependency. Without your reaction, their attempts at control fall flat. Affirmation: I choose clarity over chaos. My words are direct and calm. The third tool is detachment from outcome. Narcissists want you obsessed with their opinion, desperate for their approval, or terrified of their rejection. The moment you detach from their response, when you realize you don't need their validation, their power weakens dramatically. Detachment does not mean apathy. It means recognizing that their approval is not the measure of your worth. You can care for someone without making them the center of your existence. You can listen without absorbing. You can observe without reacting. Detachment is freedom. Remember, their approval is optional. My self-respect is non-negotiable. Let's look at how this unfolds in practice. Suppose the narcissist accuses you of being selfish because you refused one of their demands. Instead of rushing to defend yourself, you pause. You do not argue, because arguing only feeds the drama. You calmly say, "That's your perspective," and move on. This simple response denies them fuel. They wanted a fight, a debate, a performance. Instead, they receive calm indifference. This is devastating to them because it highlights their weakness. They cannot exist without reaction. Every time you refuse to engage, you expose their dependence. Repeat it like a mantra: I will not perform in their play. I walk off the stage. Carl Jung's wisdom adds a deeper layer of understanding. He spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating all aspects of the self, including the shadow. Narcissists resist individuation at all costs. They deny their flaws, repress their insecurities, and build false personas. But you, by facing your own insecurities, break free from their grip. Each time you acknowledge your fear of loneliness, your craving for validation, or your difficulty with boundaries, you reclaim power. The very wounds they exploit become the places where you grow stronger. This is why healing is the narcissist's greatest enemy. A healed, self-aware individual cannot be controlled. Affirm this truth: my healing is my power. My awareness is my shield. It is also essential to address the role of memory. Narcissists are masters of rewriting history. They will deny things they said, twist past events, and insist that your memory is flawed. This tactic, known as gaslighting, is designed to make you doubt your own perception. But the antidote is clarity. Keep a journal. Document their promises, their actions, their contradictions. When doubt creeps in, return to your own written record. This practice not only protects you but also restores your confidence in your perception. They may try to erase the past, but your clarity preserves the truth. Affirmation: I trust my perception. My clarity is stronger than their lies. Another important dimension is the illusion of strength. On the surface, narcissists may appear confident, successful, or even charismatic, but their greatest weakness is hidden beneath this mask. Their confidence is borrowed from the reactions of others. Their strength is a performance, not a reality. This is why they fear being ignored more than being hated. Hatred is still engagement. It still provides energy. Indifference, however, is starvation. When you no longer feed their illusion, they wither. Remember, their strength is borrowed. My strength is real. Let's step back and connect this to your own growth. The experience of dealing with a narcissist, while painful, can become an opportunity for profound transformation. They force you to confront your boundaries, your values, and your inner strength. They expose where you have given away too much power, where you have neglected yourself, where you have relied too heavily on external validation. And when you reclaim these parts of yourself, you emerge stronger, wiser, and more resilient. This is the paradox. Their weakness reveals your strength. Affirm it: their games taught me my worth. I am stronger because I chose myself in the end. The narcissist's worst weakness is not just their dependency on others, but the fact that once someone sees through their illusion, the spell is broken forever. Once you recognize the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Their tactics lose their magic. Their manipulation loses its grip, and you stand free, rooted in truth. You realize that their power was never relit, was borrowed from you, and now you take it back. The concept of the mask is central to understanding the psychology of a narcissist. Carl Jung often referred to the persona as the face one presents to the world. a kind of psychological costume adapted to societal expectations. For most people, this persona is flexible, shifting slightly depending on the context: professional, social, familial, while still being anchored in an authentic core identity. For the narcissist, however, the mask becomes their entire identity. Beneath it lies a fragile self, one filled with unresolved insecurities, unhealed traumas, and a profound fear of being unworthy of love. When Jung wrote about the shadow, the collection of traits and emotions that people suppress or deny within themselves, he inadvertently described what narcissists spend their entire lives running from. Their greatest fear is that others will see their shadow, the weakness, inadequacy, and vulnerability they so desperately try to bury. This is why the narcissist works tirelessly to maintain the illusion of superiority. They want to be admired for their confidence, feared for their power, or envied for their achievements. But behind this polished exterior lies a brittle ego that cannot withstand true intimacy, genuine criticism, or authentic exposure. 1. The fragility of the narcissistic self. At the core of narcissism is a fragile self-esteem that is constantly in need of external validation. Psychologists call this narcissistic supply, the fuel they gain from admiration, attention, and affirmation. Without it, their sense of self begins to crumble. Imagine a building held together not by steel beams, but by fragile scaffolding that must constantly be supported from the outside. The narcissist's self-image is like this, artificially propped up, never fully self-sustaining. When this external supply is withheld, when someone refuses to admire them, or worse, when someone criticizes them, the narcissist experiences what is called narcissistic injury. This injury is not minor. It feels to them like an existential wound, a direct threat to their entire sense of identity. They may react with anger, denial, projection, or revenge because they cannot emotionally regulate the pain of being seen as less than perfect. This fragility is why their mask is so important. It shields them from the unbearable reality of being ordinary, flawed, or vulnerable. 2. The fear of authentic connection. Ironically, what the narcissist craves most is also what they fear the most: genuine human connection. True intimacy requires vulnerability, the willingness to be seen fully, imperfections, and all. For the narcissist, this is terrifying. If they were to drop the mask, they believe no one would love them for who they really are. Their internal narrative whispers, if they see the real me, they will abandon me. This fear leads to a self-fulfilling, a cycle where the narcissist avoids authentic relationships and instead settles for superficial admiration. This avoidance can be traced back to early developmental wounds. Many narcissists experienced conditional love in childhood, love that depended on achievement, appearance, or compliance. To survive, they learned to perform rather than to simply be. They became experts at curating an image that others would accept, while burying the aspects of themselves that felt unworthy. As adults, this defense mechanism becomes a prison. They cannot tolerate vulnerability because it threatens to reopen those early wounds of rejection and shame. 3. Jung's perspective. The shadow as a path to wholeness. From Jungian perspective, the narcissist's greatest weakness, their inability to face vulnerability, is also their greatest potential path to healing. Jung believed that wholeness comes from integrating the shadow, not denying it. Only by acknowledging the parts of ourselves that we fear and reject can we achieve true individuation, the process of becoming fully ourselves. For the narcissist, this would mean confronting their deep-seated insecurity, their fear of inadequacy, and their longing for unconditional love. It would mean allowing others to see their flaws and learning that vulnerability is not weakness but strength. Unfortunately, few narcissists are willing to take this path. Their ego is too invested in the illusion of perfection, and the cost of self-confrontation feels unbearable. However, for those who do embark on this journey, the transformation can be profound. By integrating their shadow, they begin to experience authentic connection, inner stability, and self-acceptance. They no longer need to manipulate others for validation because they finally validate themselves. In this sense, the very thing that makes them weak, their fragility, can become the gateway to their greatest strength. 4. How their weakness manifests in relationships and close relationships. The narcissist's fear of vulnerability becomes especially evident. At first, they may present themselves as charming, confident, and even deeply interested in their partner. This is part of the mask, the curated persona designed to attract admiration and trust. But as intimacy deepens and their partner seeks genuine emotional connection, cracks begin to appear. The narcissist resists opening up, deflects personal questions, and may even ridicule emotional expression as weakness. When confronted with their own flaws, they may lash out or gut reality, twisting facts, and making their partner doubt themselves. This defensive behavior is not born from true strength but from fear. Every confrontation threatens to pierce the mask and expose the vulnerable self beneath it. This is why the narcissist often sabotages relationships when they get too real. It is safer to abandon intimacy than to risk being unmasked. For their partners, this can be devastating. They may sense the emptiness behind the narcissist's facade, yet they also see glimpses of the wounded child within. Many partners remain stuck, hoping that if they love enough, the narcissist will finally drop the mask and show their true self. Sadly, without deep self-awareness and commitment to healing, most narcissists remain trapped in their own defenses. 5. The paradox of power and weakness. Perhaps the most striking paradox of narcissism is that what appears as power is often rooted in profound weakness. The narcissist projects confidence but internally feels inadequate. They demand admiration but secretly fear they are unworthy. They avoid vulnerability, yet this avoidance ensures they will never experience the connection they long for. In this sense, their entire life becomes a performance, a desperate attempt to keep the mask intact. Carl Jung would argue that true strength is not found in domination or control but in self-knowledge. A person who embraces both light and shadow, who accepts their flaws and vulnerabilities, is far stronger than the narcissist who denies them. The narcissist's weakness is not that they have vulnerabilities, it is that they refuse to face them. 6 lessons for those who encounter narcissists. Understanding the narcissist's weakness is not only valuable for psychological insight but also for practical self-protection. When dealing with a narcissist, it is crucial to remember their confidence is often a mask for insecurity. Their anger often hides fear. Their cruelty often hides shame. Their superiority often hides deep feelings of inferiority. Recognizing this can help you avoid taking their behavior personally. It can also empower you to set boundaries and refuse to play into their manipulations. While you cannot heal a narcissist who refuses to confront their shadow, you can protect your own peace by refusing to get entangled in their illusions. When analyzing the psychology of narcissism from a depth psychological perspective, one of the most fascinating aspects is the subtle and often paradoxical interplay between power and vulnerability. Narcissists appear powerful, self-assured, and in command of their world, yet beneath this facade lies fragility, insecurity, and fear of abandonment. This contradiction is not accidental, it is central to the very structure of narcissism. Understanding this dynamic requires a closer look at the psychological defense mechanisms that protect the narcissist's fragile sense of self. Carl Jung, along with Freud and other psychoanalysts, highlighted the role of the ego in shaping human behavior. But whereas Freud often viewed narcissism through the lens of libido and early childhood fixation, Jung explored the symbolic, archetypal, and spiritual dimensions of the self. For Jung, narcissism represented not only a clinical disorder but also an archetypal struggle, the ego's attempt to establish itself as the center of the psyche, resisting integration with the deeper layers of the unconscious. This resistance manifests as an obsessive need for control, attention, and validation. At the heart of the narcissistic personality lies a fear of annihilation, not physical death but psychological disintegration. When narcissists are deprived of admiration or when their weaknesses are exposed, they feel as if their very identity is crumbling. This experience is profoundly destabilizing for them, and it explains why even small criticisms or rejections can provoke disproportionately strong reactions, ranging from rage to silent withdrawal. Jungian psychology interprets this as the ego's terror at being absorbed by the unconscious, a symbolic death that threatens the narcissist's fragile sense of individuality, the illusion of strength, and the reality of weakness. One of the greatest ironies of narcissism is that what appears as strength is actually weakness in disguise. Narcissists cultivate an image of superiority, whether through achievements, status, physical appearance, or charm, but this image is hollow. It is a mask designed to shield a wounded inner child who feels inadequate and unworthy of love. Jung called this mask the persona, the social face we show to the world. While everyone has a persona, in the case of narcissists, the persona becomes overdeveloped, rigid, and disconnected from the deeper self. The narcissist's reliance on this false self creates a cycle of dependency because their identity is built on external validation rather than inner wholeness. They require constant reinforcement from others. This dependency reveals itself in subtle ways: grandiosity as compensation. Their exaggerated sense of importance masks underlying insecurity. Charm as manipulation. Their ability to captivate others serves as a way to secure emotional supply. Control as defense. By controlling situations and relationships, they minimize the risk of abandonment. This cycle is exhausting, not only for the narcissist but also for those around them. Partners, friends, and colleagues often find themselves drained by the constant demand for attention and affirmation. Psychological defense mechanisms at play. The narcissist's psyche is held together by powerful defense mechanisms, which act as psychological shields to prevent feelings of shame and inadequacy from surfacing. Understanding these defenses is crucial to recognizing how narcissists maintain their facade projection. They attribute their own flaws, insecurities, or hostile impulses to others. For example, a narcissist who feels envy may accuse others of being jealous. Denial. They refuse to acknowledge truths that threaten their self-image. If confronted with evidence of wrongdoing, they may simply insist it never happened. Idealization and devaluation. They swing between putting others on a pedestal and tearing them down. This allows them to avoid genuine intimacy, which feels dangerous. Rationalization, they create elaborate justifications for their behavior, making it seem reasonable or even noble. Displacement, they redirect negative emotions like anger or frustration onto safer targets. Each of these mechanisms functions as armor around the fragile core of the narcissist's psyche. Without them, they would feel exposed and defenseless against their own inner wounds. The archetype of the wounded. Jungian analysts often employ archetypal imagery to understand psychological patterns, and narcissism is no exception. One fitting archetype for the narcissist is the wounded king. In myth, the king symbolizes authority, order, and the ability to govern wisely. But when the king is wounded, his kingdom suffers. Rivers dry up, crops fail, and chaos spreads. Similarly, the narcissist's inner wound destabilizes not only their own psyche but also the relational kingdom around them: families, workplaces, and communities. The wounded king desperately seeks to hide his vulnerability. To admit weakness would mean acknowledging his wound, and this, for the narcissist, feels intolerable. Yet, ironically, it is only by confronting and healing the wound that true strength can emerge. This archetypal pattern explains why narcissists often resist therapy or self-reflection. Healing requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like death to the ego. Narcissism as a cultural phenomenon. While narcissism is often discussed in terms of individual psychology, it is also a cultural phenomenon. Modern society, with its emphasis on appearance, status, and external achievement, provides fertile ground for narcissistic traits to flourish. Social media, for instance, amplifies the persona, encouraging people to present curated versions of themselves for validation. Jung's insights into the collective unconscious remind us that personal pathologies often reflect larger cultural patterns. In this sense, the rise of narcissism can be seen as a symptom of a collective imbalance, an overemphasis on the ego and persona at the expense of deeper, soulful connection. The result is a society filled with individuals who feel disconnected, isolated, and perpetually hungry for affirmation. Breaking the illusion. The power of the narcissist lies in illusion, the illusion of strength, superiority, and control. But once this illusion is broken, once others recognize that the narcissist's grandiosity is a mask for fragility, their influence diminishes. This is why narcissists react so strongly to being exposed. They cannot bear the thought that others might see their weakness, because to them, weakness equals unlovability from a Jungian standpoint. The way forward involves integrating the shadow, the parts of the psyche that have been repressed or denied. For the narcissist, this means confronting their feelings of inadequacy, shame, and vulnerability. Only by embracing these shadow aspects can they move toward individuation, the process of becoming whole. However, most narcissists resist this path, clinging to the safety of their mask even as it isolates them further from genuine connection. Having explored the narcissist's fragility, the mask they hide behind, and the psychological mechanisms that sustain them, we now arrive at the crucial stage: liberation and self. Understanding the narcissist's weakness is not only an intellectual exercise, it is a tool for reclaiming your own power, preserving your emotional health, and living in alignment with your truth. The ultimate realization is that the narcissist's power is entirely dependent on others. Their charm, intimidation, and influence are effective only so long as people react, engage, or validate them. Once you refuse to play their game, their influence dissolves. This is the single most important insight for anyone who has struggled under the control of a narcissist. Your independence, awareness, and emotional resilience strip them of their perceived power. Reclaiming your energy. One of the most critical steps is the conscious reclamation of your energy. Narcissists thrive on emotional fuel of fear, anger, or attachment. When you detach from these triggers, you starve their influence. This is not a passive act. It requires active self-discipline. Practices like mindfulness, meditation, journaling, or simply pausing before reacting are essential. Each time you resist the urge to react impulsively, you strengthen your autonomy. Affirm, "I reclaim my energy. I am sovereign over my emotions." Moreover, it's essential to recognize that reclaiming your energy does not mean ignoring reality or pretending the narcissist doesn't exist. It means interacting on your terms, with clarity and calmness. If that provoke, you respond with measured words or choose silence. If they attempt manipulation, you enforce your boundaries firmly. This conscious regulation transforms what once was a source of pain into an expression of your power. Boundaries as shields. Boundaries are not merely tools, they are declarations of self-worth. The narcissist's worst fear is not your anger or sadness, but your refusal to be manipulated. Boundaries communicate that you are in control of your life. They are the invisible armor that protects your mind, emotions, and time. Examples include refusing to argue when they escalate emotionally, choosing when and how to communicate, limiting access to your personal life, standing firm on values and principles without apology. Consistency is key. Every boundary enforced strengthens your position, while any inconsistency can be exploited. Each act of boundary setting is a mirror reflecting your self-respect, and the narcissist cannot endure seeing a life fully lived without their influence. Affirm, "My boundaries Protect me. My life is mine to live. The freedom of awareness is another transformative weapon. Understanding their psychological patterns, the need for validation, the projection of their insecurities, the cycles of idealization and devaluation allows you to interact from a position of knowledge rather than fear. Awareness breeds detachment. When you see the motives behind their actions clearly, emotional manipulation loses its power. You are no longer a participant in their illusions, but an observer of their patterns. Affirm, I see clearly. I am not trapped in illusions. The role of shadow integration. Carl Jung emphasized shadow integration as a path to wholeness. The narcissist, by refusing to face their shadow, remains fragmented, but you, as an observer or survivor, have the opportunity to integrate your own shadow. By acknowledging your vulnerabilities, insecurities, and past wounds, you gain profound resilience. This self-mastery ensures that you cannot be manipulated because you are grounded in your own truth. You turn what the narcissist fears, vulnerability, into a source of strength. Affirm, my awareness of my shadow empowers me. I am whole and resilient. Transforming the relationship dynamic with these tools. The relational dynamic transforms completely. You no longer chase, defend, or react. You no longer seek validation from someone incapable of providing it. Instead, you operate from a place of authority and calm. The narcissist may escalate, withdraw, or attempt to regain control, but your grounded state ensures that their attempts fail. You are no longer at the mercy of their emotional turbulence. You are the master of your inner world. It's crucial to understand that true liberation does not always mean confrontation or severing ties, though sometimes that is necessary. Liberation primarily means emotional independence. Even if the narcissist remains in your life, whether as a colleague, family member, or acquaintance, their behavior can no longer control your peace, self-esteem, or decisions. Every interaction becomes a choice rather than a compulsion. Affirm, I choose my responses. I am free from manipulation. The ultimate truth. Finally, the deepest truth about the narcissist's weakness is simple yet profound. Their power is entirely illusory. They appear strong because they borrow the energy of others. They appear confident because they hide fear. They appear dominant because they exploit compliance. When awareness, boundaries, and self-respect are firmly in place, this borrowed power evaporates. The narcissist is revealed not as an omnipotent figure, but as a vulnerable, dependent individual struggling to sustain a fragile ego. Recognizing this truth transforms fear into empowerment. Affirm, their power is borrowed, my power is real. I reclaim my life and my peace. By internalizing this knowledge, you not only protect yourself but also grow in self-mastery, emotional intelligence, and resilience. The encounter with a narcissist becomes a teacher, revealing where your boundaries are weak, where your self-respect was compromised, and where your independence must be strengthened. The ultimate lesson is that the narcissist's greatest weakness is their inability to face truth and vulnerability, and your greatest strength lies in seeing this clearly and living beyond it. With this understanding, you are no longer trapped in cycles of manipulation, guilt, or fear. You walk forward with clarity, resilience, and self-possession. Every boundary you enforce, every moment of calm awareness, every act of self-validation transforms what once was a source of pain into a declaration of power. In the presence of a narcissist, your self-mastery becomes your unassailable fortress. If this video helped you see the truth about narcissists' weaknesses, comment below with the word freedom and share your experience. Don't forget to subscribe to Healing Echoes for more insights and guidance on reclaiming your power and inner peace.